Hi, and welcome to the Rare Business Podcast. My name is Adrian Swinsko, and I'm a consultant, advisor, researcher, and writer on all things related to customer service and customer experience. Through this podcast, I seek out and interview CEOs, entrepreneurs, business and tech leaders, and leading thinkers about what it takes to build organizations that produce better outcomes for both customers and employees in this fast-moving modern age that we live in. If this is your first time listening to one of these interviews, then welcome, and please do dive into the archives at adrianswinsco.com, as I've now completed over 250 of these interviews in the last few years. If this is not your first time listening, then thank you for returning, and I'll aim to do a good enough job to keep you coming back week after week. Anyway, that's enough from me right now. Let's get into the interview. So, welcome to the next edition of the Rare Business Podcast. With me today, I have Joshua Marsh, who is founder and board director of leading customer social experience company, Conversocial, and, ladies and gentlemen, and author of the book, Message Me, The Future of Customer Service in the Era of Social Messaging and Artificial Intelligence. Blimey, I said that with all in one breath. But anyway, Joshua, how are you doing? Or should I just call you Josh?
Yeah, Josh is great.
Josh. So, welcome, Josh. Nice to have you on the podcast. For people that might not be familiar with you and your work, can you tell us a little bit about you and a bit about the work that you do?
Absolutely. Yeah, I've been working in the social and digital space for a long time. I originally founded a company called iPlatform back in 2007, 2008, which was one of the first Facebook app agencies in the world, working with big brands to build apps on Facebook. And this was the kind of the time of Farmville and throwing sheep. And it was kind of clear to us after a year or two that apps were a bit of a fad. We knew they weren't the future of the internet. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we were just massively excited about the huge changes that were happening with the rise of social media, the iPhone, which had come out a couple of years before, and we really believed that all communication was going to be shifting into smartphones, into social media, into kind of mobile messaging channels. And that as that happened, it would dramatically change how companies would need to connect and communicate with their customers as well. And so as a result of that, we founded Conversocial, spun that out as a separate company, and then went about figuring out how we could really help big businesses connect with their customers through all of these new channels. Mm-hmm. And it's been a journey since then. To start with, the first few years, we were really focused on helping big businesses do customer service and customer care over social media. Mm-hmm. And it was mainly public social media that was kind of driving that, right? It was Twitter was going crazy, Facebook pages, and consumers were, realizing that they had these megaphones for the first time and they could get attention, and every brand was kind of scrambling to figure out how they could stay on top of that.
Yeah.
And then, so that was kind of the focus for a while. And then a few years ago, private messaging really started to accelerate. And this kind of started with Facebook Messenger, and WhatsApp, and WeChat in Asia, and Apple iMessages over in the US. And mm-hmm. messaging just started to, private one-on-one messaging, asynchronous, on a phone, just over the last few years has come to completely dominate how people just interact. Mm. And as a result, that started to change how businesses are connecting with their customers as well. And we were at the forefront of that. We partnered with Facebook in 2015 to launch businesses onto Messenger. And we're now partnering with all of the kind of messaging channels. And, it's been pretty amazing for businesses because it's really the first digital channel which has the potential to replace the phone.
Right.
That it's convenient and easy for customers, but customers really love it. It's designed for a smartphone and has the potential to be fast and kind of, immediate, without needing the customer to be waiting on hold or sitting on a website waiting for a live chat response.
Right.
And so consumers love it, and it's actually more efficient. That kind of asynchronous workflow is more efficient for businesses and easier to automate. And so for the first time in a long time, Conversocial has been working with brands to help them move volumes away from the phone and into messaging, where they can deliver a faster, more effortless experience and start to automate more and more of that using bots.
Okay. So that's all great.
Now, I guess you just recently released a survey called "The State of Digital Care," which is in earlier this year in 2019, which is all possibly be a bit like a report card for the industry based on kind of where you think it should be going and based on where they're at, if that in some respects. So can you tell me a bit about the survey and kind of what you found? Some of the key headlines. I mean, how are we doing?
Yeah. So every year we've been, analyzing the industry and looking at how companies in the space are performing. It used to be looking at like response time in public social media. Now, as with the rise of messaging, it's really changed to be more about consumer attitudes and how they're seeing companies are doing. And what we've seen is that the rise of social media and then messaging, now bots, are all causing kind of big changes in consumer expectations and what brands need to do about it. And the main headline is that consumer expectations just keep rising, right? Of getting faster responses, easier access on digital, better support on mobile, and that consumers are also getting more comfortable with automation. Now that's happening more slowly. Every year it's like consumers are getting a little bit more comfortable. Right now it's really kind of like half of consumers feel very comfortable that bots can help them, and half don't really trust bots to be able to help.
And do you think, if I can interrupt there, I mean, do you think because I've seen other pieces of research that talk about how consumers still overwhelmingly prefer phone and email. I guess maybe it depends across different age groups, but the phone and email are still two of the largest channels, even though that messaging and chat and those sort of more purely digital kind of channels are catching up very, very quickly. What do you think is kind of like is slowing down the switch or the kind of or getting in the way of that sort of like trust? Is it because that people are not necessarily getting the implementations kind of right, or is it that just consumers, while they might have rising expectations, they've also got sticky habits?
Yeah. So first of all, a couple of things in the data, and then some of what we've seen in customers. If you ask a consumer and say, hey, if you got a quick response and a full resolution, would you prefer to get that over digital messaging or over the phone or email? If you ask that question, a majority of people, like 75%, will say, oh yeah, they'd much prefer to use messaging channels to do that. But that's if they're going to get that response, right? And the problem today is that for most businesses, they're not yet offering that full level of service in messaging.
Right.
Now we've got a case study with Volaris, one of the biggest airlines in Mexico. We've been working with them for a couple of years, and they've been gradually pushing more and more of their volume into messaging. They've been doing that by making it clear to customers on their Contact Us page. They've now got a messenger chat widget that pops up at some parts of the sales process. They've added WhatsApp links into some of the emails saying, hey, you have a question, you have an issue, message us. And in the last 2 years, they've gone from 20% of their volume being messaging to 80% of all of their customer service volume being messaging. Replaced live chat, emails down to a couple of percent, phone calls are now down to 15%, and the NPS on messaging is 10 points higher than on phone. And that's
what is it that they're doing specifically? Is it just that they're like promoting those channels and almost like are they saying anything different? Like you'll get quicker or faster. Well, quicker or faster, the same thing. You get quicker and better service via these kind of channels. Are they kind of setting those expectations, or are they just promoting those kind of channels so then customers can select those? Because that's quite a massive jump.
Yeah. What we found, and this has been across customers, is that as soon as you tell customers, hey, you can message us, this is a valid service channel, we're going to respond to you.
Right.
You'll see a pretty much instant shift away from other digital channels. Like consumers want to do it. It's just most businesses, you go to their Contact Us page, it still says email and phone us. And I think there are two parts to what Volaris have done. The first part is make that really clear, promote it in many different ways. And then they've also backed it up, right? So they are actually responding quickly. They've got a bot that's handling simple things, humans handling the rest. and they deliver a great level of service. They'll resolve stuff fully, and that's obviously the second part of it. If you say, hey, you can message us, and then you don't respond for 3 days, then people will end up phoning pretty quickly. You've got to respond fast enough that people stay in the channel, and that's the other part of it. But I think those numbers are completely possible for any brand, and even like pretty traditional brands that we've worked with, like in the UK. Once they just put it on the website, on the Contact Us page, they'll still see like a big switch, like 30 to 40% of volume will go into messaging, just by telling people, hey, you can use this as a channel.
Right. And so what's stopping people kind of like, if you like, if they may have the capability, but they're not necessarily promoting it or communicating well? Are they just not ready for it, or are they just missing a trick?
Yeah, there are a few things. I think they are missing a trick, and more and more people are waking up to that. One of the challenges around it historically has been making comparative assessments from a data perspective, right? Because think about the phone, think about live chat. Those are synchronous channels where there's established ways of like measuring like costs and average handle time and things like that. What is a case? How many cases do we have? How long does a phone call last? And then messaging turns up, and messaging is asynchronous. It's a conversation that can continue over time, and that you may have multiple issues over time in one single thread, because it is just one thread between the company and the consumer.
Which is different from a chat session, which is set up in sessions and then it ends.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. It's different. And what a lot of businesses have done in terms of experimentation is that they have plugged in messaging into like a chat system or an email system, and then it doesn't really work from a data perspective or a workflow perspective. And as a result, it's really difficult for them to get the data to say, okay, is this more efficient than chat or email or phone? And if you're a large contact center with hundreds or even thousands of agents, that's a large amount of money. It's a big investment. And for you to start moving large volumes of consumers into a different channel, you really have to be sure, okay, if we do this, what's the impact going to be? Are we going to be able to save money? Are we going to handle more customers? Is it going to be harder? And so that just getting that data has definitely been a blocker in the industry. Certainly been a big part of the focus of Conversocial has been like figuring out how to do case management, how to get those kind of metrics and numbers within messaging so that you can like directly compare different channels. And that's super, super important.
Well, exactly. Because I was going to say, if you're using messaging and therefore the possibility that the conversation is always live, if you've sent a message to somebody and then you've got a response and then you had a back and forward and then it's one issue's resolved, but then that thread is still live, as it were, then what are companies doing to almost, are they having to use some sort of signaling kind of technique where maybe an agent sort of signals that this is ended and therefore we can measure the start and the beginning of something, so you can get to a point of like understanding the number of messages or back and forth that it takes to deliver an outcome, or how long it take over what kind of period of time, number of messages, time spent on, et cetera, et cetera. How are they doing that?
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly what Conversocial does, or part of what Conversocial does for our customers. So, the agent platform we have has a case management system designed for asynchronous messaging that is essentially an overlay onto that messaging thread,
right?
Which tracks the beginning and then the end of a case. So if agents are marking it as resolved, and we've had to build in a number of workflow and like automations that we'll wait just in case the customer comes back and says thank you or whatever it is, doesn't start that in a new case, and gives an appropriate amount of time before it gives a firm close, sends out NPS and CSAT surveys.
Okay.
And that then gives like a fixed data point that you can track for things like average handling time and resolution rates. Okay.
And so the other thing that's kind of occurred to me when you talk about all this messaging space, I mean, and you've just recently acquired a company called Assist, which is a San Francisco-based chatbot AI enterprise solution. And they're particularly in this kind of conversational customer experience or conversational sort of space, and that's a thing. It's becoming a thing now. People talk about conversational marketing and conversational messaging and so on and so forth. I mean, first of all, congratulations on the acquisition. I hope that's going well. But conversational customer experience. I mean, I even heard. I think Forrester kind of started talking about it, and as if it was a thing. I mean, can you explain to me what it is and kind of how you fit into it because of this thing, as it were?
Completely. Yeah, and it is rapidly becoming a thing. And
what is a thing, by the way? Let's define what
is a thing. It is becoming a practice, like a discipline within customer experience.
Okay.
That is being used to think about how do you design these conversational experiences within messaging that can go between automation of bots and humans.
Right.
First of all, to understand it, you've got to kind of backtrack a tiny bit and say, people have been trying to figure out chatbots in customer service for quite a long time, like decades at this point. And still, if you go to like web chat, 95% of all web chats are just humans. Why is that? Well, the reason is that handing off between a bot and a human is really difficult in a traditional live chat world. Right? And it's difficult because someone's sitting there waiting for a response. You need to be able to respond ideally within like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And so if you're having an interaction with a bot, and then at some point the bot can't help you, and you need to hand over to a human, first of all, that human needs to be able to come on really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And then if they come on quickly, either they are not reading the transcript with the bot, and so you're having to re-explain everything you're doing, or they're having to read the transcript with the bot, which could take 5 minutes. And during that time, the consumer's sitting there getting more and more annoyed, right? So it's just like a bad experience. And this is important because there is no bot today that exists, even using the most advanced AI technology, that can have the full long tail of discussions with customer service for any big company.
Oh, I was speaking to somebody the other day, and they said they told me a remarkable statistic where they said, "Do you know that?" They said they tracked it, and they said, "Do you know that there is about 200 different ways that customers will ask for what their balance on their bank account is?" I was like,
pretty amazing.
It was like mind blowing. I mean, the amount of so to almost get it right at the kind of right at the very get go, to understand the differences and the nuances in language and so on and so forth is so hard. Anyway, I interrupt, but I thought it was like a left field piece of data.
Yeah, there are two parts to it, right? There is, first of all, just understanding the customer. Yeah. And our approach to bot building is very much like errors are the most valuable information you can have, because you may train in 150 ways, and then there's some other way that like the bot doesn't recognize. So partly it's just understanding the customer, and then the other thing is just the number of like intents. Right. So if you're a major company like a big telco, a big retailer, like the amounts of questions, you're going to have your like top 10. If you're a retailer, you're going to have your order delivery issues and rescheduling and returns and is something in stock. All these kind of will like make up a large amount of your questions, and those things you're going to be able to automate relatively quickly. But then there can be hundreds of like different kinds of issues that could come up, that questions that consumers could ask that are highly, highly specific, and you have to train all these. You have to build a bot that can understand and be able to resolve those. And you're never going to be able to do that off the get-go. And that means that if you're going to implement a bot, you have to be able to have this seamless handoff to a human agent.
Sure.
And that's really difficult to do. But it's actually messaging is like really the first channel because of that asynchronous nature where you can do it.
Yeah,
because you can easily have a 15-minute or 30-minute wait between the handoff from the bot to the human, given time to get an agent, for them to get up to speed, understand the context, and then be able to actually resolve your issue. And it's a great experience for the consumer because the phone's in the pocket. They're not sitting there waiting for a response. And so that's really exciting. But then, okay, how do you design an experience where it can a conversation can move seamlessly from bot to human, back to bot, back to human again, different varieties of bots and intents, and maybe there's, notifications coming through that messaging channel. Maybe there are marketing messages coming through that messaging channel. Then there's customer service channels, all through one single thread and interaction between the brand and the consumer. And that's a very different way of thinking, right? Because you can't just like send for 10 different email messages. You can send 10 different email messages in different email threads. If you do that in a messaging experience, it's going to be pretty weird and confusing, and you'll only really get a response to the latest one. And so it's this whole new way of thinking about, okay, how do you really design this conversational experience that can move between customer acquisition, pre-sales, actual full transactions, post-sale support, and back again through a mix of automation and humans. And conversational customer experience kind of sums that up. And that kind of, that design of that embodies how do you design a great experience in that channel and using those media.
So does that actually kind of mean that, given the rise of kind of messaging, and that customers are starting to move into these channels and showing preference for these channels, and the evolution of this, the conversational customer experience, that actually, to get it right, it's forcing, if you like, different teams, different departments, different functions, whether sales, marketing, service, ops, kind of whoever, to talk to each other?
Yeah, it requires more integration, right? Because it's about the teams internally working together.
Yeah.
It's also about the platforms. This is why we acquired Assist, because what we were finding was that trying to design a seamless experience that could go between human agents and bots when we were separate companies was really difficult.
Yeah.
And created a lot of issues and challenges in that experience. And we realized that, actually having this as one platform where the bot can hand off to a specific agent or a specific agent queue based on what the conversation is saying, where the agents have the complete context of the bot conversation and they can both share knowledge on intents, and you have one integration with the CRM platform so that you're all working off the same data set. We realize that all those things are really essential to deliver this great experience. And so it's kind of more communication internally within the brand and more integration from a technological perspective and the vendors as well.
Okay. Well, so given that, I mean, where do you think we're going with kind of messaging? I mean, is it that, do you think that, like the WeChat model of this world, which is becoming its own, everybody exists in WeChat, and that becomes the almost like a pervasive channel where everything gets done in there. Like I've heard stories of people out in China where pretty much all facets of their life, whether it's messaging or whether it's kind of searching or purchasing or banking or whatever, it all exists within their WeChat application. Is that the future for messaging as you see it, or do you see it? You have a slightly different view?
Yeah, I mean, WeChat's a bit of a special case, right? Because in China had this unique situation where the majority of consumers had Android phones that were all forked away from Google and had their own kind of operating systems, and so there wasn't like an app store which everyone could use.
Right.
And it meant that if you wanted to reach every consumer in China, WeChat basically built this kind of internal app platform. And so where brands could build something in WeChat and reach everyone and have consistent payments. And that was kind of needed for the Chinese market. It's, in the West, it's a bit of a different situation. Everyone has an iPhone, or everyone has an Android running Google Play. Mm-hmm. And so you don't kind of need it from an app perspective in the same way. Right. However, the kind of rise of messaging as like the dominant channel for care is happening. And I think there are a few things that are going to really spark that forward, especially over the next couple of years. The biggest one is going to be direct deflection from phone calls. Mm-hmm. And so we've seen stuff coming out from Google on this. We've seen stuff coming out from Apple on this, where when you're looking for a customer care phone number or even clicking on a phone number on your phone, you're going to be presented with an option to message instead.
Right.
That's capabilities, which is just going to be a huge driver of consumer awareness and volume. And it's also great from a business perspective because that this is someone who was going to phone you if they didn't. There's a really kind of easy ROI model.
Okay.
And then the other part that goes with that is around commerce, right? And with Apple, you've got Apple Pay built into messaging.
Sure.
Google are going to be doing that. And now with Facebook's new announcement around Libra, the cryptocurrency they've launched, and Calibra, assuming that is successful over the next year, that's going to also make completely frictionless payments available, in Messenger, in WhatsApp and Instagram messaging when that finally comes out. And so, that frictionless payment and the ability to do commerce seamlessly is also going to be really big.
Okay, that's interesting. I mean, but it does feel like it's like you not just get one single player, but there's possibly 2 or 3 or possibly 4 different kind of players, but they're all going to be trying to build their own channels and make them the dominant channels for their communities and try and build out those services within those kind of channels. But it does feel like it may be the channel might be the dominant player rather than the brand, as it were, if that makes sense.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, and there isn't one messaging channel that is kind of clearly dominant. There are different channels in different regions with different demographics.
Yeah.
But the good thing is that they all kind of work in the same way.
Yeah.
So from like a workflow perspective, from a bot and automation perspective, and soon from a commerce perspective, while they all have their unique attributes, they're all working in a very similar way. And the events of the last couple of years is really pushing all of them to really double down and focus on security as well.
Yeah, no, it's interesting because it strikes me it's almost like I don't know if this analogy works or not, but it strikes me that brands may be faced with the same sort of dilemmas they faced when they were trying to build relationships with their customers, in the rise of the supermarket era, where supermarkets had all the power, where they placed on shelves and all that type of stuff. Whereas the rise of messaging may actually present the same sort of dilemma. If the control and the power is all in the messaging kind of channel, then it's that brands are going to have to think really, really cleverly about how do they stand out in that sort of space. What does the brand look like in that sort of space? Yeah,
completely.
That's fascinating. Yeah, lots of hard work to be done. So, with that in mind, Joshua, and if somebody's listening into this and they're thinking about sort of messaging and they're thinking about, right, we need to get ahead of this, or we need to really improve or pull our socks up a little bit and get better at this. I mean, what would you say to people? What would be your best advice for people saying that actually we know our customers want to, we're not necessarily brilliant at it, we need to get better at it. We want to kind of deflect away from the phone because some people are just calling us by default, but actually if we give them the option, they'll probably message us. I mean, what are the sort of, say, top 3 things that they should be thinking about or doing?
Yeah, the most important thing is to tell your customers about it, right? And a lot of companies are scared of that. They're scared of like, okay, how much volume is going to go in? What's it going to look like? So the thing that I always recommend is to experiment with it. Almost every brand today has the capability to only show something to a percentage of web visitors, for example. And so, put a message us button on one channel, on one of your contact us pages, but limit it. Only show it to 1% of visitors,
right?
To start with, and you have a small team who are monitoring it, and start to build up the data as to, okay, if we show it to this many people, here's how many inbounds we're going to get. Here's how we need to resource it. Make sure you're looking at the data, tracking. Hey, how does resolution rate, how does average handling time, how does the NPS and CSAT scores stack up against our other channels? And then you can gradually build it up and build the business case. But you can't, it's kind of impossible to do that without getting the data, because every company tracks a lot of these data points in their own way. And what we found is that companies really need to get their own data in order to build that internal business case. And so that's the biggest step.
Perfect. So, Josh, thank you for that. Now, I've got a couple of questions that I want to ask. I'm doing a piece of social research of my own, my own little thing. But is there anything else that we've missed out you'd like to add before I ask you a couple of last kind of questions?
No, I think that's great. I'll say one more just on automation. around bots, that that's the other kind of big thing around when you do enable any channel which makes it easier for customers to reach out, you will probably see an overall increase in contacts, right? But with messaging, because you're able to implement bots that can fully resolve 10, 20, 30% of issues, that actually allows you to have more contacts without needing more agents. And if you do that correctly, you're making it easier for your customers, and you're building bigger and deeper relationships. And that's the real benefit.
Great point. Thank you. So, as I said, I'm doing this little bit of kind of ongoing social research because I recently published a book, and the book's called Punk CX. And it's based on this idea that actually there's a lot of people talking about customer experience, and it's all getting quite complicated. And that sometimes we're not necessarily hitting the mark or meeting expectations and things. And I've been advocating a bit more of a punk approach by saying that I think that punk grew out of almost prog rock in the 1970s, and I'm saying that customer experience is looking a little bit like prog rock, like overly complicated, more interested in itself than its customers, and so on and so forth. And that made me sort of hypothesize what would a punk version of CX look like. So that I'm asking for people for input on two things. First one is, if I said to you, what one or two words would you use to describe a punk approach to CX? What would you use?
I mean, the word that immediately comes to mind is irreverent. I definitely love that word. And then it's all about just for me, it's what actually matters to the customer, right? And often, I think about effort a lot. There's another word. And I think that it's really interesting for companies who are like, hey, if we're actually looking at what is the amount of customer effort in getting this done, and that it's so much more of a customer focused way of thinking about it, as opposed to like NPS, which is great. The NPS is really an overall business score, and it's often being used as a kind of management tool as opposed to something that's really about what's the experience for customers.
Excellent. And then the final one I was asking is like, do you have any, if I said to you, what company or brand do you think epitomizes a bit of a punk CX ethos? Who would you say?
Well, the company that immediately comes to mind is Tesco in the UK.
Okay.
And which may not be the one that jumps out to you, but they were one of the first companies in the world to actually staff a social customer care team in 2011. That's when we started working with them, early 2011. And despite being a big company and like having hundreds of agents on social, they made an explicit decision that they were going to give a huge amount of freedom to their agents to, A, resolve the issue, whatever that took, and B, to be creative and thoughtful and interesting in how they did that, especially publicly. And instead of having manager approval, they implemented a peer approval system where other agents on the team could check and approve what the agents were doing. And this has resulted in hundreds of like Metro articles talking about the funny responses that Tesco's customer care team have posted on Facebook and Twitter.
Right.
And I think it's you see brands who are like doing these where it's like very well thought through from a marketing and PR team, and it's kind of once a year. And Tesco are doing it all the time at like large scale, because they just decided to like really go all in, and that it was like really important from a customer experience perspective and from an agent perspective to like give them that freedom to do it. And I think that's really cool.
That's great. What a great story. I like that. I mean, it's almost like wisdom of the crowds within an organizational kind of context.
Yeah.
So Josh, thank you for that. That's super interesting. I mean, I wanted to say congratulations on the success of Conversocial so far, and also for the new acquisition of Assist. But also thank you for kind of sharing your time and your insight today for and helping us kind of dig through some of this kind of messaging stuff, because there's lots of different variations out there, and it's something I've been interested in sort of just digging into a little bit more, and just sort of trying to sort of tease out all the differences and where the best practice is. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time today. That's been great.
Awesome. Great. Really great to be on.
Well, that's it for another interview. I really hope you enjoyed it. Now, every time I complete one of these interviews, I learn something new, and I try and incorporate that new learning into my writing, my speaking, my workshops, and the consulting that I do for my clients. If you're interested, you can find out more about how I work with clients over at adrianswinsko.com. But one final thing before I go, please consider heading over to iTunes or whichever podcast platform you choose to use, and do leave a review. Every little helps, as they say. Anyway, that's all for now. Thank you for listening, and do listen in again. All the very best.